Now that we've started our project up and we've got it running, let's start to replace some content on this default landing screen with the actual content or the actual HTML that is required for our application. Now, I'm going to use those terms very often throughout this course. I'm going to be saying to you very often, let's change some content that gets displayed to a user. Anytime I use those words, it's almost always a sign that we need to open up a component template file and replace some of the HTML inside there. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to find the component template inside of our file that is responsible for showing all this starter content right here, and we're going to replace it with some HTML to show our application instead. So like an H1, a label, a text input, some checkboxes, and so on. So let's open up our code editor and get started with that right away. Between the last video and this one, I took the liberty of starting up my code editor inside of my PW project directory. So I encourage you to pause this video right now, and you should open up your code editor as well. Once you've got your code editor open, you're going to see a tremendous number of pre-generated files and folders inside of here. As I mentioned before, we're going to eventually understand what all these different files and folders do, but for right now, let's just stay focused on making some changes to our app to get some content displayed that looks like this right here. So I'm going to find my src directory. Inside there, I'll find a folder called app, and then inside the app folder, I'll find a file called app component HTML. That is our component template file. If we open up that file right now, we're going to see a tremendous amount of content inside of here. So this is all of the CSS and all of the HTML that is required to get this starter page visible on the screen. If you read the comment at the very top, it'll say that you should delete all this stuff and start to add some code for your particular project. So let's do that right now. We're going to delete everything inside this file, and then we're going to replace it with a lot of additional HTML to show the H1, label, text input, and so on. So we're going to do a pretty good amount of typing right now. This is all going to be very standard HTML elements, nothing really Angular specific just yet. So let's do some typing. To get started, I'm going to first place an H1 at the very top that says password generator. After that, I'll show a label that says enter length and an input right after that. Now let's just save this file right away and make sure that we are in fact editing the correct file and make sure that we see this stuff appear inside of our application. So I'm going to save this file. I'm going to flip back over to my browser, find the tab that is at localhost 4200, and I'll see the H1, the label, and the text input in there. Okay, so we're definitely editing the correct file. Now, if you did not see your browser automatically refresh, you can just manually refresh the page instead. So let's continue adding in some more markup to get all this different content inside there. Okay, so back over. I'm going to find the label and the input that we just put together, and I'm also going to wrap it with a div. The reason that we're doing this is to just make sure that all these different form elements that we're displaying get placed on their own separate lines. If we don't use a div, then all these text inputs and checkboxes and whatnot, they will all show up on the same line. Okay, so after that, we'll then place another div. And inside there, we'll place the first of our 3 different checkboxes. So I'll place a label that says use letters. And then after that, I'll put an input with a type of checkbox. So again, if a user checks this checkbox right here, it means that they want to have some letters present in their randomly generated password. So now we want to show 2 other checkboxes as well. They are both going to have identical structures to what we see right here. So rather than typing all that stuff out from scratch, I'm just going to copy this div and everything inside of it, and then paste it underneath 2 times. There's 1, and there's 2. So here's my first one. I'll find the second one, and I'm just going to change the label on there to instead say use numbers. And then on the third one, I'll change it to say use symbols. Okay, let's save this file again. Let's go back over and make sure everything is now being displayed correctly. Yep, I'd say that's a good start. Now just a little bit more, we need to show a button, and then 1 more label and 1 more text input. So we'll go down to the bottom of this file. I'll place a button that says generate. And let's wrap that with a div as well. And then finally, at the very bottom, we'll do one more div with the label that says your password and one more input inside. And this one does not need a type of checkbox because it's going to be the text input that shows the user their password that was randomly generated. Okay, so that should be it. Let's save this file. We're going to flip back over and just make sure that we've got the general structure put together. Yep, I'd say that looks pretty good. All right, so we just took care of all the markup that is required for our project. And again, we put it into a component template file. Those component template files are always going to contain all the HTML for our application. So now all you and I have to do is go back into that component template file and some other files, as you'd probably guess. We're going to add in a bunch of additional code to handle stuff like the length and these checkboxes, and make sure that when we eventually click that generate button, we actually generate a password and show it inside that input. So let's get started on all that interactivity stuff in just a moment.